Hello, good afternoon, everybody, or good morning for anybody joining us on a Western coast. My name is Scott Sinclair. I'm the Senior Manager of Programs here at Cancer and Careers, and I'm so happy to have you joining us for today's webinar. For those of you who are listening in from your phone, please let us know by sending an email to cancerandcareers@cew.org with your name and the phone number that you're dialing in from. That way we can confirm your attendance and make sure you receive all of the relevant information and follow-up materials. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, Cancer and Careers is a national nonprofit and the only program of its kind solely dedicated to empowering and educating people with cancer to thrive in their work environment. All of the programs and services we offer are provided free of charge. Our comprehensive website, available in both English and Spanish, is the heart of everything we do. There you can find various support services, including a resume review service and access to career coaches. We also offer a collective diary as a place to share your feelings, thoughts, and ideas that may help to inspire and validate other visitors to our site. Our educational blog and newsfeed are rich resources where for those who have been diagnosed, their caregivers, employers, healthcare professionals, where they can stay current on topics related to work and cancer. Additionally, our publication library provides tangible, easy to digest information on working and looking for work after a cancer diagnosis. Titles are available in both English and Spanish and can be ordered or downloaded from our website, again, all free of charge. We also offer a number of free events throughout the year, both hour-long webinars like this one, as well as full-day events, and I'll be back to tell you more about that after Wade's presentation today. Now, a few key things related to accreditation. And for those of you who do not require this information, please bear with me. I'll try to make this as fast as possible. Today's virtual conference is accredited for CEs by the Association for Social Work Board, the New York State Education Department State Board for Social Work, the American Nurses Credentialing Center Commission on Accreditation, and the California Board of Registered Nursing, and is accredited for PDCs for HR professionals by SHRM. If you plan on receiving continuing education credits for this program from any of these accrediting bodies, please proceed with the following steps. First, you must log in or call in individually. Participants who listen in on somebody else's line will not receive credit. Second, within 2 weeks of this event, you must complete and submit the evaluation and receive a passing score of 80% or higher on the post-test. The link to the evaluation will be shared in an email to you, which will be received no later than tomorrow, Thursday, July 13th by 5 p.m. Eastern. All of this information can be found in more detail on our website. And as many of you might know, Zoom has a lot of great features which you can use to interact with this event with us and with other attendees. You'll see a Q&A box either at the bottom or the top of your screen. If you have any questions about today's content, please submit them by clicking the Q&A box below. We know the importance of privacy here, so there is an option to submit your questions anonymously if you choose to do so. We'll do our best to answer everyone's questions at the end, but please be patient if we don't get to your question today, or if you think of something later on, shoot us an email at cancerandcareers@cew.org, and we'll be happy to get you an answer. You'll also see a chat box on that same features panel. Our goal is to keep you engaged with the content today. And just to note that posting in the chat box, your name will appear there, so it is not private. And also, if you have a question, make sure to put that in the Q&A box, not the chat box where we might miss it. So thanks in part to direct support from Genentech and QVC, Cancer and Careers is able to offer this 9th year of the Balancing Work and Cancer webinar series. This program was created to provide patients and survivors, as well as their care teams and employers, with concise, targeted information about work-related issues that arise after a cancer diagnosis. Additionally, we'd like to recognize Cancer and Careers' year-long sponsors who support all of our core programs and allow us to continue providing all of our resources and services free of charge. Now, you've probably heard the phrase self-care before, but what exactly is it? Is it just a buzzword that gets tossed around on social media, or is it something that can actually make a difference in your life? And how can it improve your experience of balancing work and life after a cancer diagnosis? To explore all of these questions and more, I am thrilled to introduce Wade Iwata, who is a neuro-oncology social worker at Seattle Children's Hospital and a longtime friend of CAC. Wade has spent his entire career working in oncology and has worked with patients and survivors of all cancer diagnoses, providing support to them and their families in connection within the cancer community. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Wade. Welcome, Wade.
Thanks, Scott. Hello, everybody. Good morning. Good afternoon. I'm looking at the chat and seeing a lot of people from all over the country, so it's really exciting. Just want to thank you guys for taking the time out, and hopefully you will get a little information today that will be beneficial to you in the presentation. And so we're going to be talking about self-care today, which I think is a really big, as Scott said, kind of buzzword and kind of makes us think of a lot of different things. And so as we start thinking about self-care, fancy slide, it's important to start thinking about some of the images. And these, when I was creating this presentation, were some of the images that initially came to my mind. I think self-care, there's a real kind of prescriptive tone to it in terms of what it is. And that kind of helps to drive some of these images that I pulled. I think out here in the Pacific Northwest, hiking is a huge thing. And a lot of people, I think, do that as a form of self-care. I have a really close friend of mine who she's really into kind of crystals and the kind of benefit that they pose for her. Meditation, exercise, all of these things are types of self-care, but I also don't think that they're the only things that self-care represents. And so these are kind of, again, just images that were my first reaction of when I started to put this presentation together. I think when we're thinking about self-care, there's obviously a lot of misunderstandings of what self-care is. I think some of those pictures represented this kind of new agey quality that I think can often be prescribed to self-care or the term self-care or what we think of as self-care. And so for a lot of people, I think that they feel like that doesn't apply to me. That's not something that I find helpful. You know, I really love to highlight this toxic positivity. I think self-care, we often think of it as something that has to bring us pleasure or joy or make us happy. When we kind of ignore the other emotions that we have, the sadness, the anger, the frustration, we're not fully taking care of ourselves. So it's important to kind of address ourselves as a whole being instead of just this positive side of things. Also, I think self-care can be really thought of as expensive. We have to go take these yoga classes, we have to join this gym, we have to go on these amazing trips, we have to do all of these things that make it look like we're taking care of ourselves that can be really costly. And I don't think that that is necessarily true. And again, I think that there's an idea that self-care is very prescriptive, that there's one way to do it, one way to take care of ourselves. And so I hope throughout this presentation, you start to recognize different ways that you can take care of yourselves and different ways that self-care is really an individual thing for everybody. As we look at kind of the definition of self-care, I think it's really important to kind of have this context and that it's the action to preserve or improve one's own health or protecting one's own well-being and happiness, in particular during periods of stress. And so, you know, as we're kind of looking at cancer and work, those can be really stressful situations. So how do we protect ourselves from that? So that's what we're going to kind of jump into and look at. And again, hopefully some tools will be gained throughout this presentation for you. I'm going to be pulling some information from this self-care guide. It's put out by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, which is a part of the government. And I just find that this guide is really helpful in creating this framework for what does wellness look like? What does self-care for each of us incorporate? How can we start to address those things? And it's a really great tool that I would encourage all of you to look at some point, as it just kind of helps walk you through and think about things a little bit differently. So within that guide, they kind of break things down into these 8 dimensions of wellness. These are kind of the parts that I think are really important to look at as we start to think about self-care. All of these are incorporated, all of these are impacted or impact us, and they impact us differently. So at some points, some things may be more impactful for us, or may need more attention to us, or we may need to pay more attention to. They're not all equal, as this picture shows, at the same time. They all can be, but I think, again, our priorities can fluctuate, and we may need to pay attention to one area more than the other. So this is just kind of a closer look at what these different domains kind of mean, and kind of what we're looking at. And so again, like when we're thinking about cancer and careers and our work lives, occupational is clearly something that can be impacted, or something that we may need to look at. You know, our physical health and physical, the treatments and everything that you're going through can also impact your wellness and your self-care. So I realize I'm using wellness and self-care interchangeably. I think that they are very similar. So I think when we're talking about self-care, it is incredibly important to think about what are the barriers to self-care, because that is often what's keeping us from actually addressing the things that we need to do to take care of ourselves. Life is probably one of the biggest barriers, I think, that gets in everybody's way of taking care of themselves. Things are happening. We have work, we have school, we have kids, we have pets, we have obligations, friends, family. Life is busy and life is crazy. So that can be a huge barrier for everybody. Treatment, side effects, late effects to cancer can be a huge impact. It can be a big barrier and something to really look at and to acknowledge. Again, work demands, family, personal obligations, lots of different things come between us and the ability to take care of ourselves. So again, as we're thinking about those barriers, I also think it's important to think about self-care differently. I think a lot of people think if I'm taking care of myself, I'm not addressing the other things that are important or the other obligations in my life. And so we sometimes feel that thinking about taking care of ourselves like that is being very selfish. I think taking care of yourself is not selfish. You know, it's a very big cliche kind of in the mental health field, but we talk a lot about using the airplane and the safety announcement of putting your oxygen mask on before helping others. You really do have to take care of yourself before you can take care of others. Self-care is always evolving. What may work for us today may not work for us in the future, or what may have worked for us in the past. It may not be as helpful as it once was. Again, it's unique to each of us. It doesn't have to cost a lot of money, and it doesn't have to be Instagram worthy. I think we'll get into social media a little bit later in the talk. But social media, I think, has had a huge impact on what people think self-care is and what it has to be. And so it doesn't have to be what we see when we look at social media. It's not indulgent. It doesn't mean that you are being, you know, too much or, you know, again, selfish. It's all about taking care of yourself. And it also doesn't have to be isolated. I think self-care, there can be a misconception that if you're taking care of yourself, that you have to do it by yourself. I think part of self-care for me is being with my community, being with my friends, my family, my loved ones, is one of the ways that I do take care of myself. So I think kind of the process of all this is reframing how we think about self-care. Again, it can be simple things that are in our own backyard. It can be things that we're already doing. We can learn from other people in our lives, good ways to take care of ourselves. And so I would encourage you all to start to think about self-care a little bit differently and reframing what that is. I hope you all, when you saw this picture, you had a little moment of awe. That is the cutest dog in the world. That dog is my dog, Reggie. And when I was writing this presentation, he was sitting by my side, and I really started to think, wow, my dog is actually a really great example of self-care. Not only does he provide me a lot of comfort on a stressful day, like I can come home and there's just something about being with my animal, with my pet, that just kind of removes a lot of that stress and the anxiety. But also, I look at my dog and I think, you know, he lets me know when he's hungry. He lets me know when he wants to play. He lets me know when he wants to be petted. And those are all really great examples of self-care. I mean, I get it. He's an animal and he's a dog. But I do think it's important. And it taught me a lot about self-care in terms of it's okay to acknowledge what you want and ask for it. So again, as we start to think about self-care and we think about self-care in kind of the context of cancer, cancer also can really impact everything that we're going through, everything in our lives. Kind of when we look at this picture, the reason I put the 8 dimensions of wellness up there again is we can easily substitute out that word wellness in the middle for cancer and realize that cancer is impacting all of those areas as well. You know, there's changes in our relationships. The finances are impacted, whether or not we are able to continue working or have had to take time off of work for our treatments. I think spirituality is often impacted when cancer comes into somebody's life. And there's obviously the physical changes and impact to the way that our mind is working. Chemo brain is a real thing and is often overlooked and I think often kind of brushed under the rug in a lot of ways and is incredibly impactful to a lot of people. And so again, just recognizing that cancer, it doesn't impact them all equally. It can impact them certain areas more at specific times in our treatment. But it is definitely something that impacts all of these areas. As well, we can start to think about work the same way that we think about wellness and cancer as well. So we take out work and we kind of plug it into where wellness is. Work impacts all of these areas as well. And when we start to think about cancer and how it's impacted our work lives, I think it's important to think that work can be impacted greatly. Will my coworkers think about me differently? How will I be able to manage and do my job? Will there be accommodations? How do I ask for those things? I know Cancer and Careers has a lot of great information on how to communicate with your employer, how to disclose. All of these things are really important to think about when we start to think about self-care. You know, I also think it's really important that sometimes we can't get our needs met unless we talk about these things. And so how can you support yourself to feel comfortable and confident in getting your needs met at work? I think there's different types of self-care that are available to us. Again, I don't think that there's a prescription to these, but there are definitely different types of self-care that we can incorporate into our lives. These are the 3 that I kind of identified. There's in the moment one that we kind of address in the moment. There's ongoing and habitual, so things that become a pattern for us, and then protective things that we can do for ourselves. So I start to look at in the moment types of self-care. Again, this is a type of self-care that you address things as they arise for you. One of the big things I put it in here, emails. Emails are like the bane of my existence. I get so many of them a day. I get really overwhelmed by them. And I just let them accumulate and accumulate. But when I do start to go through them and I see that number getting smaller and smaller, it does alleviate a lot of stress and anxiety for me. And so addressing emails as they come in, answering them in the moment instead of putting it off and letting my email number kind of go up is a really great thing that I've started to do to help me. these are things that can create joy and happiness in the moment. Again, if a symptom may come up for you, I think it's learning how to address that. Boundaries, we'll get a little bit more into boundaries. And I think kind of in the moment, it's also about acknowledging small accomplishments, whether it's completing one of your treatments or completing all of your treatments. Again, acknowledging the things that you do is a great way to take care of yourself in the moment. Again, these are just some examples of things that you can be doing or maybe are already doing. Whether it's reading, cooking, TV, going on a short walk. Again, going back to my dog Reggie, I used to live in New York, and so he's a New York City dog, and now we have a big yard. And for some reason, he refuses to go to the restroom in the yard, and so I still take him on multiple walks, which I am actually very thankful for, because I think that is a great type of self-care. So I go on multiple walks a day with the dog, which has been really great for me. Another thing, I think, something as simple as watching TV. A lot of people don't think that is necessarily a positive thing, but I do think that it's a great way to address stress and anxiety or feelings of being overwhelmed, is just sitting down and relaxing. I have often told people this story, again, as many of you know, like working or living and being a part of the cancer community, it can be very emotional at times. And I think finding an outlet for those emotions is important part of self-care. And for me, I address those emotions by watching reality competition shows. So like The Voice or America's Got Talent, which is on right now. For some reason, I watch those shows and it just makes me cry. And then I feel so much better after having some time with those TV shows. Again, these are things that can be easily accomplished. They don't take a lot. And so in the moment, it's just, again, one type of self-care that we can incorporate into our lives. Ongoing and habitual types of self-care, these are things that become more habits in our lives. I was looking up in preparation for this kind of, how long does it take to form a habit? And, some of the research, it varies. The shortest time I saw was 18 days to form a habit. And it was a range of 18 to 254 days. So, which was done by a study, I think in like 2012. And so, again, these are things that you can do that you find trying to create them into a habit. I think, I put healthy eating up here. I was very concerned about putting this, but I think healthy eating is something that can often make us feel better. And I think it's really important that I highlight, like, healthy eating is not about restricting or avoiding foods. There's certain types of foods. It's more about thinking about it in moderation. Again, tracking those foods that give you energy, things that make you sleepy, just kind of adjusting and, again, creating that habit for you. And then figuring out if there's different exercises or activities that engage your body and your mind that help you feel better. Again, tracking those to see what is helpful and what is not is a great way to start to create these ongoing or habitual types of self-care. Then the third type of self-care that I put down here is protective self-care. So the top bullet point that I put is what I refer to as FDRs, the feeling, doing, and respite, and spiritual. Those headings are kind of ways that I'll get more into of categorizing people to help us with expectations. Boundary setting is a really great way to have some protective self-care for yourself. Are there times during the day where you just can't go out, where, if you go out past a certain hour, the next few days are going to be really difficult for you. So knowing yourself, knowing your body, knowing what works best for you, and just setting those boundaries really well And just again, having good self-awareness. How am I feeling in this moment? Are there things that I can do to make myself feel better? Are there things that I can do to keep this feeling going forward? Are there ways that I can create this feeling in the future? Again, just being aware of how you're feeling. So I gotta get a little bit more into the FDRs because I do think this is a really important tool and a really great tool. It can also feel really uncomfortable to do this. So I was introduced to the FDRs by an old colleague of mine. Some of you may have heard her speak here, Julie Larson. She's a really great social worker that I used to work with back in New York. And what the FDRs does is it helps us, again, monitor our expectations. And so what I typically recommend to people is that they get a piece of paper out, create 4 different columns, and those 4 columns are your feeling, doing, respite, and spiritual columns. And then what we do with those is we put list our community, the people in our lives, into those different categories. So what that looks like is our feeling friends. These are the ones that we want the most of, but these tend to be the ones that we have the least of. I tell folks that they usually can count these people that fall into this category on one hand. These are, again, are the people that you can go to talk openly about how you're feeling, the frustrations you're having, the good, the bad, the ugly. They don't judge you. They don't misunderstand you. They don't make you feel embarrassed. These folks, again, they're typically the ones that we want the most of, but we do tend to have the least of them. This can also apply at work. Is there somebody at work that you feel that you can go to kind of talk about your emotions and feelings about at work? You know, again, I can't emphasize this enough. It's a small number of folks typically fall under this category. And what this does is by kind of recognizing or knowing it helps you feel better about the type of support that you need when you go to these folks. Our doing friends, these are the people who can do things for us. Again, I have a lot of different things listed on here: laundry, grocery shopping, childcare. You know, we have a lot of these friends. I think when people are kind of thrown into the cancer world, we have a lot of people come out who make meals for us or can kind of come over and do laundry. They're the ones who they show their support by doing something. They're not great with emotions. They may not be coming over and asking how you're feeling, or if they do ask you how you're feeling or how you're doing, they don't have a good response and it can leave you feeling unsupported. You know, again, also when we start to look at work, are there coworkers that you can look at to help you with any tasks that you may need support with? Are your supervisors or bosses, are they helpful? You know, again, I think that these people, we tend to have a lot more of these than our feeling friends. And again, they show their support by doing acts. And then as we get kind of to our the respite or fun friends or fun coworkers, these are the people who distract. They're the ones who want to take you out, go out bowling, go out to a baseball game, go do something with. They don't love the emotional side of things. They don't love to talk about stuff. You may have good conversation with them, but when things get kind of to that deeper emotional side of things, like they're not giving you the type of support that you need. These tend to be the folks in that make up the greatest number in our communities. And so, again, you know, I think starting to categorize our friends or our family, all those things, it just helps to monitor their expectations. And then the last one, the spiritual, this was added by actually a client that I was working with, recommended adding this in. And it doesn't necessarily have to involve organized religion. It's just more about kind of spirituality, kind of what that means to you. It can provide I think it provides a great sense of community for a lot of folks. And these are people who can help answer any spiritual crisis questioning that you may have. Again, purpose and meaning are really something that I think a lot of folks struggle with as they're kind of going through a cancer diagnosis or the late effects of that. So moving on, do I need to improve my self-care? I think that's, well, yes, I pose it as a question. I do think that it is more of a statement. I think everybody out there needs to improve self-care. I think we all struggle with it. And even the folks who do it well, there's always room for improvement. And so these are some of the signs that maybe you can do some things to help improve your self-care. So fatigue, stressed, all of these things I think are really important to look at. And if you are identifying 1, 2, 3, maybe all of them, it's a way to start looking at and seeing if there are things that you can do to improve these feelings. So again, building habits, going back to kind of the ongoing and habitual types of self-care. These are things that you can do to start creating those habits, changes in behaviors, things, letting go of things that you have not found helpful, creating more opportunities for the things that you do find helpful. What are the lifestyle choices that work for you? I think boundary setting is one of the areas that can be really challenging for folks. I think when we start to set boundaries, it can create kind of some struggles in our relationships that we have, and people not feeling, maybe upset or abandoned, or that you don't prioritize them or their relationship, when in fact I think you're trying to create an opportunity to present your best self moving forward. And so boundary setting is really challenging. I don't want to make it sound like it's an easy thing to do, but it is also it's a really great way to make sure that you're taking care of yourself and doing the things that make you happy, make you feel safe, secure, and that you're taking care of yourself. I think, I put this in here a couple times. So self-awareness is really key as we start to think about self-care. What are you thinking? What are you feeling? Acknowledge those thoughts, acknowledge those feelings. That is actually a really great form of self-care. And regulating, some of those emotions and negative self-talk is important as we kind of create this process. I think, again, going back to kind of that idea of toxic positivity, it's not always about making sure that things are positive for us or we're only acknowledging the good things in our lives, but creating space and opportunities for us to have those other emotions and other feelings. We all have them. It's very normal. And I think we don't always do a great job of acknowledging those. So when we start to think about self-care and work, I think this can be really challenging as well for a lot of people. I think a lot of folks think, well, I'm at my job, I'm there to do something. I was hired for a reason and I have a job to do, but there's still things that you can do to take care of yourself at work. I think, one of the things, one of the bullet points on a previous slide about do you need to improve self-care is if you're feeling complacent. I think at work we can often sometimes feel complacent and that we're not progressing in our job. And so are there things that you can do to increase how you feel about the work that you're doing, or feeling that you're giving more or doing more? Are there new tasks that you want to take on? Are there new areas that you want to learn? Are there training opportunities? Again, we can still take care of ourselves at work while still meeting the work-related tasks that we have to do. I think, again, sometimes when you are kind of thrown into this cancer community, maybe you aren't able to still meet the same job requirements or duties that you were previously prior to your diagnosis. And so talking with your supervisors, your bosses, and seeing like, hey, I really enjoy being with this company. Is there something else that I can do so that I can remain working here? I think there's lots of opportunities for self-care at work. And I think any job that we have, it's a part of our life. And so it's owed to yourself to take care of yourself while you're there as well. I think additionally, you can make breaks work for you. Whether it's going outside on a nice day for a walk during your break, thinking about what you can do when you're outside of work, making plans for the night, making plans for the morning, whatever can help you kind of get through the day. I think I have a coworker here who spends his break reading every day because it's just a way for him to kind of remove himself from the work environment and kind of get into something else, and it helps him get through the day. Connecting with your coworkers, I think, is another great way to take care of yourself at work. And if you kind of work at a job where you're not working with a lot of people, connect with people on the phone. Make sure that you maintain that social side of things while you're at work. There's lots of opportunities, and I'm sure you guys have a lot of additional ideas of different ways to take care of yourself while you're at work. Technology, there's a lot of new apps out there, a lot of great things to help you kind of address your mental health, kind of coping, self-care. There's a lot of good things out there. There's also, I think, a lot of things out there that make us feel isolated or that we're not able to take care of ourselves in the same ways that other people are. Again, this goes back to that idea about social media that I talked about earlier in the talk. Social media can really, I think it has a lot of great things. It can help people feel connected to a lot of folks. I think specifically within the oncology world, it creates opportunities for you to meet people who are going through very similar, if not the exact same diagnosis or treatment protocol that you're going through. But it can also create lots of feelings of isolation, envy, sadness that you're not able to participate in life in the same way that some people are on social media. I think, there's a lot of people out there whose lives on social media look really amazing, and in reality, their lives are not anywhere what's presented on their social media accounts. Again, there's these apps that I think are good apps. I would encourage you to kind of look at them. Online groups, if you are at a spot where, being out in public isn't the safest for you, or you have some mobility challenges, online groups, Facebook groups can be really great ways to connect with other folks going through things. I always do throw out the caveat that, if you're going to be looking for an online group, I think it's important to always see if it is moderated by a mental health professional, whether that's a social worker or a psychologist, seeing if there's some sort of additional layers of support. I know some of these online groups can get really intense. And I think what happens a lot of times is when people are in very stressful or scary situations, they reach out to try and get a layer of support. So a lot of the stories that are told in some of these social media groups or online groups feel really dire, but don't always apply to everybody who is going through something similar. And so I think it's helpful to have it facilitated or moderated by a mental health professional. Always there's external supports to help with self-care, relying on your community, your friends, family, coworkers. Again, I do think it is helpful to categorize our friends in the FDRs. I think it just helps you, again, monitor the expectations. You don't want to be going to a fun friend when you're feeling extraordinarily emotional or you just got bad news. They're just not going to be able to provide you with the emotional support that you may be looking for. As well as if you go to your emotional friend when you just want to go out and have a good time and get your mind off of things, it just helps you to kind of know what expectations. And so there's also a lot of good counseling support groups and things out there. I always put a plug in for the hospital social worker. I'm one here at Seattle Children's. I know that hospitals have them across the country. And if nothing else, I think Psychology Today has a really great tool for those of you who don't know about it. I put a picture of it here. It's called Find a Therapist. You can put your zip code in there, and it will actually pull up a list of therapists in your community that have availability. It will list any insurances that they take, any of their specializations that they work on. But it's a really great way to get connected to counseling if you aren't able to find something in your area. This is just a kind of a list of some of the resources. These are some links. So the Psychology Today link is there, as well as the link for the guidebook that I mentioned and utilized a lot throughout the presentation. I also think, again, there's some really great things that Brene Brown puts out there. I find the way that she presents things is just phenomenal to me. I also love that she's a social worker. And so that's one of the reasons why I kind of found her. And then just kind of listening to her talks, I've learned a lot through those, just on self-care and putting ourselves first. Again, some of these are just some good apps that are out there for you that I think could be helpful. I would encourage you to kind of look at them and see if any of them speak specifically to you. And then here is my contact information. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions or thoughts, or if you guys just need anything. I'm more than happy to kind of help get you connected with whatever you may need. So that's it for me.
Thank you so much, Wade. That was great. Before we get to Q&A, and if anybody has questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A box. I just saw one pop up right now. Before we get to that, I want to just go quickly through some of our upcoming events here at Cancer and Careers. Our next webinar is going to be next month on August 2nd, which will be led by myself. The topic is balancing work and cancer. After that, we have a two-part communicating effectively session. And then we also have balancing work and caregiving coming up on November 1st, as well as a marketing yourself session to end the year in December. And then we also just announced our West Coast conference coming up on Saturday, October 21st, which will be held again on Zoom and open to anybody who's touched by cancer. We call it our West Coast conference because we put it in the time zone of the West Coast, but anyone can join from around the world. So we hope that you will join us for some of those coming up. You can also go to our website and stay up to date on all of our upcoming events. And once again, all of the registration is free. So finally, I'll leave the CE requirements up here as well while we go into Q&A. The evaluation will actually pop up at the end of the session today. If you have time to fill it out right away, you can go ahead and do that. Again, you'll get an email tomorrow, no later than 5 p.m. with the link and all the information that you'll need for there. So Wade, the first question I have here is, I have a lot of irrational fear and shame about not being able to do things I used to do at work or mistakes I make, especially decision-making due to chemo brain. As it relates to self-care, can you speak about how to reduce this?
Yeah, I think that is a very common feeling, and something that honestly isn't ever really addressed with the medical teams, or really we don't do a good job of preparing folks for what life looks like after treatment. And so I think that this is, again, I don't know if it is necessarily an irrational fear. I think it is actually a fear that, your brain is working differently because of the treatments that you went through. That's not something that you have any control over. And so I think the first step is, I think, just accepting and acknowledging that this isn't something that you did. You're not failing at something because you aren't able to do the same things that you did previously. And so just being able to kind of talk to yourself about, this isn't something that I'm choosing. This isn't something that I purposely did. This is a side effect of the treatment that I went through, will hopefully help to alleviate some of that pressure of I can't anymore, or I'm not doing what is expected of me. I think being able to acknowledge it is a really great first step. And then what I think is important, the next step is, again, thinking about how do you want to disclose this to your employer or the people, your colleagues, and asking for the support that you may need. I think thinking about what are you comfortable sharing, what are you comfortable with them knowing. It's important to getting your needs met, because I think, yes, chemo brain is a real thing and it can impact your work responsibilities. And so to get the accommodations or the things that you need at work, you do have to disclose it. But what are you comfortable sharing with them? What are you comfortable asking for? I think that is kind of one of those ways to once you figure those things out, that will help to free up kind of, I think, some of those emotions that you're having.
Yeah, and just from a practical standpoint of, if you're feeling like you're having difficulty making decisions or can't remember things because of brain fog, chemo brain, is there someone that you can use as a sounding board? Do you have a supervisor or a coworker that you can say, whether you choose to disclose or not, to pull someone aside and be like, I'm not sure what to do about this. I'm leaning towards this. What do you think? Or don't be afraid to ask for help, and it can be framed in ways either completely disclosing or not disclosing at all, depending on how you phrase the statement. And we're always here too. If you have individual things that you want to talk about, you could shoot us an email, cancerandcareers@cew.org, and we have social workers on staff who can walk you through more of that practical stuff as well, with like real life scenarios. The next question I have here is, what suggestions do you have for finding motivation from behavior changes? It's easy to think about what habits you'd like to create, but harder to find the actual energy to make those changes. And boy, do I relate to this question.
Same. I'm like, if I had an easy answer to this, I would fix it. Like, we would all be in a different spot. I think finding the motivation, like, that is it's a very personal thing to kind of figure out. I think generally, if we are generally what I would say, start to track how you're feeling. If you are repeatedly feeling kind of overwhelmed, sad, unmotivated, whatever the feelings are, if you track it, you'll start to see the pattern. And I think sometimes that pattern can be the motivation in ourselves. So let's say we track how we're feeling, for 7 days, and we realize that those emotions are all kind of keeping us down. They're not, whether they're feelings of sadness, frustration, anger, whatever those may be, it may take us looking at that pattern to be what motivates us. I don't think there's one way to create that motivation. For me, it would be helpful for me to see that pattern of, for the last 7 days, this is how I've been feeling. I don't want to feel this anymore. So what can I do to start to change those feelings? I know when I do this, it makes me feel better. Energy, fatigue, like those are real impacts of going through cancer and going through treatment, and can be long lasting. Again, I feel like I sound like a broken record, but I think acknowledging that those are real and that fatigue is a really hard thing to get over. And it's something that I think a lot of people feel is something that they have the power to change. Fatigue, it's just something you have to work through. There's nothing, you can get 20 hours of sleep and you're still going to feel exhausted. So I think, again, making sure that you acknowledge that these side effects are real, like don't let people minimize them. Just acknowledging a lot of those things, I think, can sometimes be what starts to create that habit or that pattern for you to move forward with some of the behavior change.
Yeah, that's great. The next one I have here, what if my workplace is just inherently stressful and everybody is stressed all the time? How do I make self-care part of my day when my body just inherently tenses up whenever I'm there?
Yeah, I think working in stressful environments, being around people who are constantly stressed out, like that in itself is just draining. And so I think it's, one of the slides in there is really making breaks work for you. Utilizing those times to step away, get outside, go on a short walk, even if it's a 5-minute walk, that can help to reset some of that stress or the anxiety. It can help to remove some of it. I also think just preparing yourself when I'm going to be going into work and it's going to be stressful and people are going to be stressed out. These are the things that I'm going to do to try and protect myself from that. Like having a plan can be really helpful for people. And talking about the FDRs, I think when we know what to expect, that's a great self-care tool because we know we're going into work. We know it's going to be stressful. I need to prepare myself for that. You may not be able to take away the stress or what everybody's feeling, but just being prepared for it is self-care.
I agree. I find it too helpful to just kind of focus on what my responsibilities are and what I have to do that day and do my best to tune everybody else out when I can. It's like make your checklist, see what what deadlines you have today, what has to be done today, what has to be done tomorrow, and then just like try to heads down, put headphones on, and listen to music if people are like really running amok around, and see how much you can try to just block it out if you can. It's easier said than done in different situations and different projects and time of year, but the more you can focus on, I think, what you yourself have to accomplish instead of getting wrapped up in a overall mood of the office can do wonders, at least for myself. Someone once came up to me and said, asked if anything was wrong, and then I asked why, and they said, because you're calm, while everybody else was running around getting ready for a big event. And, I think that really spoke to how I deal with things and made me realize like, oh, I guess that is something that I do. The next question I have here is, you mentioned negative self-talk as something to be aware of and regulate. Can you say more about how to do that? I have a really bad chemo brain right now, and I'm much slower at my job. And on days I'm really tired, it's hard to turn those off.
Yeah, negative self-talk is, it's really hard to stop. Again, it gets kind of into this habit forming, and can take a really long time to kind of create the habit of, okay, I'm starting negative self-talk and it's not making me feel well, so I got to stop it. But to continuously do that, just it's really difficult to do. Specifically, if you are struggling with memory issues and it's struggling with kind of chemo brain, like how do you remind yourself of, this isn't feeling well. This is what I'm trying to work on. This is what I'm trying to create this habit for. So, I think notes can be really helpful, but it's also hard if you're struggling with kind of fogginess or memory or anything. It can be really hard for you to kind of remember that I should be looking at this note. So sometimes I think it can take some time. I think alleviating that pressure that you feel for yourself of like, I have to resolve this issue right now. It may not be a good time. One of the things I would say is if you can take anything away from this is when you start to have that negative self-talk, just do a quick check-in of how am I feeling right now? Like, what is the emotion behind it? And let's utilize that as the motivator to try and change things. It's not so much about stopping the self-talk in the moment. It is, but what is the emotion behind it that's driving that? And like, let's start to look at that, because I think once we start to address the emotional impact of things, hopefully that self-talk will start to change over time. It's really challenging. I just want to say that, like, it's hard to do. Self-care is hard. I don't want to minimize and say like everything I talked about in this presentation, if you incorporate it, you're going to be in this great spot moving forward. No, this all takes work. I think the habits of doing all of these things, even thinking about the in the moment self-care, creating an opportunity, that's also a habitual thing. Like being able to acknowledge things in the moment, like that is kind of a habit. Like if we don't do a good job of acknowledging our successes or our wins or the times we're sad or frustrated or overwhelmed, creating those things, it just takes work. Self-care, it's not easy.
And I think we've all been in those situations of like, we have a month, 6 months, a year, 5 years, whatever, where we're like really nailing it. Like we're eating healthy, we're exercising, work is going great, our family, like everything is working. And then something gets you into a rut and you slowly, you start doing more takeout, you start doing, going for a run 3 times a week instead of 4, and slowly start slipping. And I found myself there, and you just have to kind of remind yourself like of what your goals are and what you're doing, and that it's normal to have kind of ebbs and flows and all of this too. I think is what I keep reminding myself about when I can get hard on myself, being like, oh my God, you just ordered takeout for the 4th time this week. Like, what are you doing? And and you just have to remind yourself, and maybe next week I'll make a nice meal at dinner and block it off, or find some way to get back on that train. I think this is gonna be our last question. I am a caregiver for my daughter who has cancer, and I'm finding it so hard to find time for my own self-care. I know I should be doing something for myself, but I just feel so guilty whenever I leave her for more than a few minutes. Do you have any words of wisdom that you can think that will help push past this? I really want to do my best for her, and right now I'm not at my best.
Yeah, again, I know I said it early on in the presentation, and I know it is such a cliche, but I think there's no way that we can properly be a support to somebody else if we are not taking care of ourselves. And so I know that it can feel like really selfish to be like, okay, I know that this person is in need of X, Y, and Z, and I want to be there for them, but I have A, B, and C going on in my life. If I don't take care of A, B, and C, I can't help them with X, Y, and Z. And so it is super important, and it's not selfish. It's actually being a better support, a better caregiver, a better friend, a better family member to address the things that you have going on so you can be more present. Because what happens, I think, for a lot of people is we're like, well, I have these things going on. I'm going to ignore them and go help out this person because their issues feel bigger than mine. But when you get there and you're trying to help them, in the back of your mind, it may not be conscious, but it's still there, it's still present, and it's still pulling at you and tugging at you. And you're just not able to provide that focus. So I think giving yourself permission to address the things that are going on in your life, taking care of yourself, making sure you're in a good spot to be able to provide support to somebody else is actually very key. And it makes you a better caregiver or better support to the people in your life.
And isn't it the old adage of put the oxygen mask on yourself before helping others? You know, it's just so true in all different kinds of life. And just a shameless plug, we do have a webinar coming up in November for balancing work and caregiving. We also have a recorded webinar from last year on the same topic. This year, we're going to be joined, though, by Brandon Gottlieb, who's a career coach, who he himself was a caregiver for a family member with cancer. So we're going to have some more real life scenarios in it this year, and hope you can join us for that. Or if you want to go right now and watch the recorded version, you can go find it on our website. And with that, we've reached the end. Thank you so much, Wade. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We hope we'll see you again, and hope that you have a great afternoon.